very clear to everybody today that design is huge in terms of it can add value in many, many ways. And that's why design companies are being, picked up and bought by the larger companies like banks and media houses. I think the most important aspect for me is design brings a sort of sensitivity to a larger, very business and economic driven organization. And that human factor is something that was missing earlier.
Welcome to Design Drives, your audio experience about what, how, and why design drives things forward. A podcast hosted by Sebastian Gier, together with forward-thinking design practitioners from around the world.
In this episode, I talk with Ruchin Shah, Senior Interaction Designer at Frog India. A conversation that I actually really enjoyed. Ruchin shares his personal experience and journey as a designer, getting international work experience actually quite early in his career. How he was involved in growing Frog India, actually Frog's first presence in India, being there just right from the start. We also talk about the cultural differences he sees working with international clients compared to Indian working cultures. We're also going to talk about the future of design education, as well as the maturity and value of design in India, as well as the design community itself. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with Ruchin Shah from Frog Design. I'm pretty excited to talk to you about your past experiences, and really looking forward.
Thanks for inviting me.
What's interesting, you got quite a lot of experience at different consultancies and different environments. But maybe you can by yourself a little bit, give an overview, and for the audience so they get a little bit of context about where you're from and some of the bits and pieces of your journey.
Yeah, so I started my journey in the field of design when I was very young. I always knew I wanted to be a designer. That was a very interesting thing that I've not heard a lot of people say. But even when I was a child, I was like designing automobile cars with specific use cases in mind. And I still remember that. And a lot of people, my relatives, have told me that I used to do that. Mm-hmm. And then it always shifted between different types of creative fields like architecture and interior design as I was growing up. I wanted to do those kind of things. And then eventually I spoke to a lot of experts before jumping into the field, because coming from a background of a traditional business family in India, it wasn't something that was very comfortable for my family to completely accept, because design was not a very known field. So that's how I kind of went into education. I studied Bachelor of Fine Art in the University of Pune. And then after that, I went on to do my master's in design in IIT Bombay, which is one of the good colleges to pursue design in India. And after that, I started my career with Cognizant as an interaction designer. And then I moved from there to another company called Claris Technologies. And I stayed with Claris for around 5 years. And I think I really learned some of the best things about design in that place. Of course, I was following a lot of other things that were happening.
But is there any specifically that comes into your mind that you learned at that place?
So I think keeping the user-centered approach and always keeping the user at the center of your process, which sometimes can be difficult at a tech-driven company, because the technology will drive you to solve problems that tech cannot solve, right? So the user kind of takes a backseat. And also, I think the openness and the freedom to explore was what Claris gave you. And it made the designer be the center of the process, the leading person who used to interact with the client, who used to do the design. There was no product managers or project managers. We were the spearheads of the whole design process. So I think that was great learning, and it kind of helps you be a leader right at the beginning of your career. So.
Mm-hmm. And then afterwards you joined Frog, or was that something?
Yeah,
something
so after Claris got acquired by Globant, which is an Argentinian-based company, but they had some interesting projects as well. And I think the great thing about that was they gave us a little bit of scale. The kind of project that I worked in when Claris turned to Globant was, in a sense, more strategic. Like service design and system design level projects were something that I did at that particular time. So in 5 years, I kind of spanned from UI, UX, visual design, service design, system level design. And then the kind of work I did, of course, my portfolio got built up. And then when Frog approached me that they were starting a studio in India.
And how was the time there? So, like you started 2 years ago, you said, right?
Yes. So I have I've been working at Frog for 2 years, and it's been quite an exciting journey so far. I work as a senior interaction designer there, and the role and responsibilities that I have to take are pretty much very unique. I mean, it's highly leadership type of expectations that you have to be the owner. You have to, interface with clients on a day-to-day basis. You have to also interface with the developers to get the work out. You're also strategizing how things will work with each other. So there's a lot of components to this role. But yeah, these 2 years have been very interesting. And it's not only from the work aspect or the project aspect, but also setting up the studio. The studio itself is something that we've built from ground up because, of course, we've had support from the other studios in Europe and in the US. But the ground reality is that we were actually going out and buying furniture for the studio and, deciding so many things that we needed, like policies and processes were being defined by what we want for the Indian context or people who are working in India.
So you designed the studio.
So we designed the studio. In some sense, we are still designing the culture of the studio. It's pretty exciting.
Super interesting. And then, you were touching on some of the topics you worked on your last experiences. Where I wonder a little bit because you have quite a perspective from consultancy, right? So do you also had some chance to be involved in some of the shipping, actually some of the execution of the design work, implementation? We wonder a little bit about that experience as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was never that you strategize something and that's like a map and some sort of key pointers and you're done with the work. No, that I have always believed and I have continued to believe and do right from user research to actual implementation. I have been involved in all those stages of the project. And I enjoy that. I like to be involved right from the beginning till the end. And then when the product goes out, actually go and capture the feedback again and see if things need to be changed, if things still need to be improved. There's always that aspect as well. So,
is there any favorite part of the design process, something you enjoy the most?
I don't think I have a favorite. I think I like the system aspect of it, where you're trying to figure and put things together, that ambiguous area where things are uncertain. You don't know if this is the right direction to take or what is the design principles that you need to formulate in order to make that product hit the market and be a little bit successful in the right way, communicate about the product in the right way, or the service in the right way.
What are some of the topics you work on at Frog when it comes to domains? And
in India or across the world?
In India specifically, in your case.
Okay, so I'm currently working on an IoT smart home ecosystem. So that's been something that I've been working on since a year. And we are also looking at how somebody could live in the future in some aspects. So that's like a vision sort of or a concept level work that we are doing. But also we are shipping products and we are shipping ideas with every release. So there's actual things that are going out in the market and we get feedback from reviews and customers, etc. And then you improve whatever is not working and still launch many more new products. So that's one aspect, and there's this other aspect which is more conceptual.
We talked offline a little bit also that you travel quite a bit to Europe as well, and working with some of the clients there. And I wonder a little bit about some of the differences you see in terms of like design culture when it comes to Europe and India.
So I travel to Europe much more often now, but I've also traveled to the US a lot. I think the design culture or the culture is similar in a lot of in a corporate environment. It's very similar, to be honest. What changes is how people react to design solutions, the way feedback is given, the openness to what design is, or the education of what design is a little skewed. So in India, it's a little bit more difficult to communicate the value of design because it's a different way of thinking here, right? People are a little more scared of investing a large amount of money without actually knowing what is going to be the outcome. Is it going to be a success? And that hedging of that bet is not, I don't think they have a appetite for that kind of investment.
Maybe not yet. Right?
Not yet.
I guess that's the difference between applying design as a more strategic element in the process. Maybe there's much more uncertainty connected to that, while I guess you can be quite straightforward with design as well if you apply it more from a craft perspective, right? You already know sort of what you're gonna get, right?
Yeah.
But like, I guess the uncertainty about having be a strategic part in the process, I guess that's the issue, right?
Yeah.
So it's also interesting thinking about that you work with other frog studios, right? And I mean, you sort of start to build up the frog studio here in India, right? But I guess you see a lot of difference in terms of maybe the culture when it comes to the other frog studios. Is there anything that comes into your mind when it comes to that?
I think the interesting thing about Frog Studios is each studio is its own
Universe.
beast.
Yeah.
They run. It's almost an individual company in that sense. The India studios also are independent to some extent, and of course we have a common thread of good design, and we share a lot of resources across all the studios. There's a lot of activity that people are doing together as well. But as you said, like the culture is very unique. The kind of projects that we have are unique. Also, it's important to remember that we have just completed 2 years, and that is a milestone in some sense because having around 40 people in two studios in India in 2 years is quite an achievement. And also sustaining the kind of projects that we have, building on top of them, getting projects because of the good work that we've already done is remarkable. So the kind of projects have also defined our culture in some sense. The kind of people who have joined us have also defined the culture in a lot of sense. The locations like Bangalore and Delhi, they have also helped kind of shape a little bit of how people come into work, how they leave from work, and engage with each others.
Yeah, what's also interesting is like you sort of moving into that space where you say at the moment there's still less appetite on that, right? I mean, you were covering, you said like the full design process, right? So even the more strategic side. So I thought that's very interesting, and I'm wondering a little bit about considering your background in terms of where you come from and so on. Or what do you think the impact of design can be?
I mean, I think it's very clear to everybody today that design is huge in terms of it can add value in many, many ways. And that's why design companies are being, picked up and bought by the larger companies like banks and media houses. I think the most important aspect for me is design brings a sort of sensitivity to a larger, very business and economic driven organization. And that human factor is something that was missing earlier because of course you have to keep on you're trying to build on things or trying to settle the water, and you've got a sort of a base to create, a foundation to create, and then the human aspect is when you're trying to kind of build on top of those experiences which were already there, right? So you build a foundation and then you want to build a house, and then the way to enter in the most comfortable way, or if you want a garden, how do you make the garden the most productive orchard that you can get, is where design comes in. And somebody will help you figure that out because they have experienced that, or they know how to kind of lay things out in the right way.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, since you work in India, I guess you're also quite connected to have a good overview about the Indian design community, right? How do you see the Indian design community or UX design community developing?
I think the design community or the UX design community is maturing really fast, but also there's a danger in some sense because if you grow too fast, you don't know if you've picked up the right skills or if you're going the right way in some sense also. Because what happens is there's a lot of attention and there is a lot of noise in the design world, especially in the digital design world in India, because we have so many tech startups. And there is a crazy need for really good designers who can understand the whole landscape of that organization or whatever the company is offering and design to make that technology very useful and usable by their end users. Unfortunately, what is also happening is because of this attention that this field is getting, a lot of people want to enter the field because there is money involved, good money involved. And people who don't necessarily have the right kind of sensitivity to design are now in the field. And sometimes they are also leading teams in organizations. And I've seen this firsthand where the company, they will not know better because that is what they have seen, right? Because if you don't know better, then, well, everything is good. Design is perceived to be subjective. I mean, of course, you can objectify a lot of things through success metrics, but I think what is happening is people like me are a little scared as to where do I stand if I have been in the industry for 8 years. I've tried to explore very different methodologies in design, try to see what works best, go to users, talk to them, get those insights, do the synthesis, and follow a process that works for that particular problem. But I think not a lot of people are doing that. Not a lot of people are following that. And that leads to a little bit of casual attitude towards the field of design. It also means that some people who are not trained in the field of design feel like they can design or they can do something that is designer. So I think these are the risks that the Indian industry faces today.
What could be some of the enablers, or how do you maybe this could be also regarding the Indian design community. What is missing in terms of getting design be involved into these kind of discussions?
First thing is that India needs many more design colleges. It needs people who are educated. Of course, experience helps a lot, but if you have your basics right, if you have your design principles in the right way, I think it helps a lot. It will take you a long way further. The second thing is it's already started, but we have a lot of podcasts and a lot of mediums to kind of look at what design is. Like you can read books, and the internet is like an open space to explore what design is and what people are doing.
So, what would be your advice for young design students, maybe from India, who want to get into design and want to get into UX design?
For students, the first thing is keep in mind that design is not a casual field. It's not a field where you can just come and, of course you can do it, but it's not a field where you just apply color to some boxes or you create some shapes and then you apply color. It's a much more methodological way of identifying problems, seeing the scenarios, seeing the technology constraints, understand the user's context, understand your own limitations or the organization's limitations in terms of resources and time and many other things, and then move on to bring something to market. So all these things, though they are very high level, you actually need to go into the depths of each and every one of them to see what is the right way forward. And that is what the ambiguity is always about, right? As a designer, you need to be so sure about your skills and the organization who you're working with and the team you're working with and the users. What are their expectations and needs? How do they behave? Where do they live? So, you can only inform yourself to a certain extent. The rest is all exploratory. And I think that is what for the design students or people who are wanting to enter the field of design, I would say to be somebody who can confidently say that I can solve your problem, you need at least 10 years to be able to do that. You cannot be... I don't think I have this very interesting question that I ask. If you look at other fields like medicine, a doctor will never call himself a doctor until if he's studying. They don't call themselves doctors, or a dentist doesn't call himself a dentist until he gets his degree and he is certified, right? So why do design students call themselves designers before they have finished education? So nobody calls themselves a design student. Mm-hmm. They call themselves designers. Even in the army, nobody calls themselves a commander until they have reached that position. So is design such a casual activity that you can just call yourself whatever you want, even though you haven't reached that maturity level? Is a question that I have in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of discussion these days about do we actually, a lot of people ask this actually me at the conference, some Indian young people who, do I actually have to study design in order to become a designer? Because at the moment, there are also a lot of programs, online programs, they're really on the rise when it comes to learning UX UI design. And if you go vertical, if you want to go vertical, right, quite early, then I guess it could be a way. But I want to know a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think I'm not against any kind of education, or if you're going to do like a 3-month course, please go ahead and do it. But where is that going to take you? Do you think you will be well equipped to take on really large challenges just by doing like a 3-month course? I don't know. I find it very difficult to...
3 months probably not.
I don't think so. Somebody who spent years honing their craft, trying to understand the processes, would, I think, be in a much more better position to give you a solution, because that is what you want. You want a predictable outcome. And then you would go to a person who has that experience rather than somebody who maybe doesn't fully understand processes or doesn't fully understand the context, or even how to pull information from a context. Right? So you can be extremely talented and know all of this by birth, or you can pick it up through work. That is also possible. A lot of people who I've worked with in the past have picked up skills and they do great design. But yeah, I think it will take you to a level where you can execute well, definitely. But thinking strategically, thinking much more holistically,
Experience.
comes only with experience and maturity.
Yeah, I think it's about patience also, right? Maybe that's why a lot of these programs are also successful, because I think a lot of young people these days miss the patience because now everything is instant, right? Instant reward on anything. So that's interesting.
I have one more thing to add. When I started my career, or even before I went into my master's, I spoke to a very famous Indian architect called Girish Doshi, and he gave me a very nice way of looking at it. He said, any creative field, be it music, be it architecture, be it design, you have to give it a minimum of 10 years. It's called a gestation period for you to mature. Like pregnancy, right? It takes 9 months means it takes 9 months. There is no escape from that. Of course, you can do many things to make that experience better, or you can pick up skills.
You can make it shorter if you work more, I guess. So.
Oh, do you think so? I don't know.
And not to a degree that you can't cut it down to like 1 year, right? Yeah. But I definitely think it's also about the amount of work you put in.
Yeah.
I mean, to a certain degree, you can shorten that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point, is that you can, of course, gather a lot of experience. But the more experience you add, I think you can shorten it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
The point is, expose yourself to as many things possible and give it time. Give that time so that you can actually do that kind of thing.
Yeah. Be aware of the body of work that is necessary, right? Yeah. So maybe as a last question before we wrap it up, if you look ahead, just personally from your side, what are the things you really love to work on, and where do you see design could have a really big impact?
So there are couple of
what kind of impact you want to make personally, right?
I think the main thing that I would like to bring to the table is get more design talent, and really good design talent. I have a personal problem with people who treat design as a very casual activity, and people who think they can do design just with the bare minimum resources or the bare minimum effort. So I think what I would like to bring to the table is like, hey, take your time, and if you need help, take the right kind of help, read more, and just keep on doing many more things to encourage my own motivation to do good design. And then hopefully people will see that it's happening, and they will also kind of take that into account and do the same kind of things.
Yeah. Any certain topics you're really interested in when it comes to if you look ahead?
No, I'm actually...
Industries.
It's very interesting because I'm very agnostic in that way. Anything that has a real, a lot of human impact, especially culturally or behaviorally, I think that is something that excites me a lot. Scale is something that excites me a lot. So things that go out into market and then it impacts millions of people, I think that is something that definitely it's tough, but it's something that excites me. So I run behind those things.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thank you so much for sharing all the insights. It's really fascinating.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
That was the episode. If you want to give us feedback on the podcast, have something to contribute to the next episode, or just want to get in touch, feel free to connect with us either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram messages, or simply via the designdrives.org website. We love to hear from you.